G'day guys, welcome back to Supercoach with DR and welcome to the 2020 season review. From Supercoach sense, we're all done and dusted, season over, our final rankings are set, and it's time to take a little bit of a breather and reflect on what was the most unique Supercoach season that we've ever seen. But it's a bit of a strange feeling, isn't it? I know for me, lots of blood, sweat and tears, hours upon hours of research have gone into this season, and suddenly it's all over. But for this video, we'll take a quick look at my final ranking and review my final team. I'll discuss the lessons that I've learnt this year, talk about my best and worst trade of the year, what I would have done differently, and then finish off with a quick look at some of my starting 2021 picks. I know I'm a Supercoach tragic, can't help myself. And then I'll give a few thank yous, a few shout outs, and let you know what content I've got planned for the preseason and going into the rest of the year. So let's jump into it. The overall rank was 37.95. Pretty disappointing in the end because I pride myself on getting to at least that top 2,000 overall ranking by the end of the year. But I suppose given some of the circumstances, it's been an okay year and still good to finish inside the top 2% overall. Total score 38,558. Again, not terrific, but I never really blew out during the season. You know, I think my worst rank was around that 10k mark pretty early on the season, and then I was pretty consistent, I suppose, from there on in. So this is how the final team ended up. Am I happy? No, not really. Certainly a couple of blokes I didn't expect to finish with, but beggars can't be choosers, and due to some unexpected long-term injuries to Primos, coupled with the amount of cash in the bank and available options at the time, I had to make some compromises, which did end up hurting me a little bit. But we'll start with a very quick-fire round 18 review, then go into more of a seasonal yearly review. I must admit, I only watched the one game of footy this week, which was the Lions game, as my main priority has been with the family. You'll notice I haven't been active on Insta or Twitter for a while, and that's because my little fella's been pretty crook in hospital, and unfortunately, my wife's nan's now in hospice, so a bit of an emotional time. And very quickly, I will talk about the lessons I've learnt this year. But on this, one thing that we all have to remember is that at the end of the day, Supercoach is just a game. I'm someone that does take it pretty seriously, and I know I've had many weekends ruined over the years due to a poor round, but I've now learnt just to take it in my stride a little bit and try to enjoy the ups and downs. So the first thing you'll probably notice when we look at these round 18 scores is that it was a round with some really, really big highs, and then unfortunately some lows with that also. We had Ryan with a 121, that was nice in the back line there. Laird and Stewart also raised a bat for me, which was nice. Neil 142 ended the season in a really strong way. Talk about ending the season in a strong way. Danger came with his biggest score of the season, a big 170. Really, really nice from him. 5 for the 120, Mitchell 130, all solid scores there. Grundy with the 122. Rob, I thought he'd go pretty well against the Tigers, to be quite honest, and really happy with that 129. Scored more than Gawn, which is always handy. Petrarca had the vice-captain on him. First time I'd actually included him in the VC or the captaincy loophole and ended up locking that 130. That was a solid score from him. And Simpkin, talk about one of the most frustrating picks of the year. It was great to see him end in a strong way with a 144 also. But then we look at blokes like Ridley, 64, Haynes, 34, Cripps, he injured himself, 26. So those three blokes only combined for a total of 124. So that's what a loss of about 170 points just on average there. But look, these things balance themselves out. You know, we didn't expect Danger to get a 170. That was really, really handy. So it is what it is. But yeah, overall, an okay round. You know, some mediocre scores from your Baz, Brayshaw, Akers type. Duncan, he was absolutely terrible. He's been, yeah, a failed pick, I'd call him. Give me, one nice 130, and apart from that, just reached the 100 a few times, and then throwing in some lower scores around the 80s in amongst there as well. So that's been disappointing. Boak and O'Brien, been really happy with those trade-ins. I've owned those blokes for the last 3 weeks, I think, and they've given me some really solid scores. Boak on debut with a 149 was really, really nice. So, time to analyse the final side. You'll notice that I have some checkered flags there. That's to represent the players that I started with and held throughout the season. I'll focus not only on each player's season average, but the average that they actually gave me after the time of trading. That's really important to do when analysing your own side, as a lot of your trade success really depends on your timing. So the thing that really stands out in my defence is the fact that only one of my starting picks remain, and that's Sam Doherty, and he's been pretty disappointing, but every other player on that line was a trade-in, and most were relatively successful in the end. So I'll start off with the man up the top there, Rory Laird. He was a great trade-in for me. Bought him in round 12. Disappointing score on debut with only a 77, but then he went 120, 102, 122, 136, and 108. So at the time of trading, he had a season average of 102, and he gave me an average of 111. So that was a real success for me bringing in Rory Laird. But the disappointing thing about Rory Laird was that I was going to bring him in the week before, just before he got that massive score of 185. I talked to George about him, had that real gut feel that he was about to go big, given the fact that he was, given that new role in the midfield, but didn't back my gut and go early. I thought, no, I'll give it one more week just to see. And of course, it was a week too late, but still a success, Rory Laird, and I think a big tick for me. On to Luke Ryan, I bought him in round 13. At the time, he had a season average of 106.5. Gave me a really nice scoring debut with a 142. Then, unfortunately, followed that up with a 67. But that was an injury-affected game. Landed heavily on his hip. Didn't play the last quarter and a half from memory. And that was just really unfortunate. I didn't actually think that he'd get up the next week. And I was actually prepared to possibly have to trade him out. But he did get up. Managed to score a 104 the next week, then went 115, 104, and 121. So at the end of the day, he gave me an average of 108, which was 1.5 above the average at the time of trading. So I suppose you have to give him a tick, but the disappointing thing was that I could have got the Seagull in if I'd have made some other compromises. But it was a choice at the time between a combo of the Seagull and Luke Parker, or Luke Ryan and Nat Fyfe. And I like Fyfe a lot better than Parker at the time. And Ryan was a real pod at the time as well. And given the fact that the Seagull had a really high ownership, I felt that I really needed to go somewhere different just to take a bit of a risk in order to try to get a few extra points up my sleeve on top of the rest of the competition. But didn't work out in that respect, in the fact that, I went with Ryan over Seagull. But as a pick overall, if you take that injury-affected game out, that was a really successful pick for me in the end. And I'll give him a tick. Not a huge tick, but I think it was a decent trade-in. Tommy Stewart, here to Grouse here. I'm bringing back Grouse Wes. I got him in round 10, and he was my Mr. Consistency. 7 out of 8 scores 100 plus, and whilst many of my other defenders were riding a roller coaster, he was just cruising at a really consistent level. For a bloke that cost me just over 440k, he gave me a terrific return. I'm looking to start him next year because he's got a great role for Supercoach, takes the kick outs, neat disposal, intercepts well, and can attack off half-back. So Tommy Stewart, a huge tick for me. Jordan Ridley, didn't this bloke have a great year? He won the Essendon BNF, assumed that role as a real backline general. I traded him in round 6. I recommended him in the stock market video a couple of weeks before that, but as usual, didn't take my own advice again and waited a little bit longer. He was ultra consistent at the start of the year, but became a bit of a yo-yo in the last 2 months. Up, down, scores of 124, 70, 115, 76. 136, 73, 119, 64. But we all need to remember that he's still very young, he's inexperienced, and Essendon as a team really fell away in the last 2 months. So still a tick for me, but his last 2 months have probably put me off starting him next year. But in saying that, expect him to only get better. Doc, my only remaining starting pick, and a pretty underwhelming pick after a really bright start. Very high ownership, so we all suffered a little bit with him. Teams started to close off on those easy kicks, pay more attention to him, and he had a huge stretch where he couldn't even hit 100. Paid a fair price for him, I suppose, at the start of the year, but for the return that I expected, I'll have to call him a fail, I think. Nick Haynes, a breakout year from him. Like Ridley, was ultra consistent, and then towards the end started to lose it a little bit. I got him in round 14, started off well, and then fell off a cliff, netting me an average of only 82 over the last 5 rounds. So a solid selection for those who got him in early, but a massive failure for me. So overall, not too bad. Certainly a lack of starting picks there. That hurt me a little bit. But, injuries to Sicily and Duday, that certainly didn't help things. So I was forced to make a couple of extra trades there that I wasn't necessarily planning on. But it is what it is, and we can't control these injuries at times. On the midfield, Travis Boak, didn't expect this kind of a season from him, to be honest. I obviously got him in a little later, but delivered me an average of 122 over the last 3 rounds, which is really handy. So a tick for Boak, but only for a short period of time. Lachie Neale, I made the bold call at the start of this season that he'd even get better, and it was a good call in the end. He'll win the Brownlow, finished with a total point count of 2284, which was over 200 points higher than the second place Jack Steele. Scores of 157, 171, 166, 147, 152, 157. I'll keep going. 149, 167, 151, 142. That made him the #1 must-have pick in Supercoach 2020, and he delivered me some massive captain scores as well. My best starting pick in the midfield this year, and I'm locking him in again in 2021. Big tick for my man Lachie Neale. Danger, one of my earliest and most controversial trades-ins. Look, I looked too much into his scoring history at Cardinia Park, and I severely overrated his early home ground advantage. I listened to too much of the outside noise, broke my number one rule not to trade out a Primo after only one round, and this would have been a really handy trade to save. It didn't work out too badly in the end, as he really boosted his average in the last round to make things look a little rosier, but if I'd have kept on Twoliver and backed in my months of research, I would have been a lot better off. So for me, probably a break even, but given the circumstances, I'm giving him a fail. Jack Macrae, 5th highest for overall points, started the season quietly with 3 scores in the 90s and had owners worried, including me, but then went bang and went on a massive 2-month run with consecutive scores of 138, 122, 169, 162, 113, 183, 118 and 141. A quiet month to end the season, but overall another great year for Macrae. Certainly a tick for me. 5, as I said before, brought him and Ryan into the side in round 13. 3 poor scores, 3 decent scores, 83, 86, 87, along with a 120, 132 and 140. So average at the time of purchase was 114 and I received an average of 108. So a failed pick for me and a frustrating player to own. Just spent too much time up forward at stages where he just couldn't get near the ball. I'm putting the cross on him. I bought in Titch in round 11, and he was a pretty solid play for me, netting me an average of 113. Scores 102, 132, 132, 122, 120, really nice, but then a 94 and a 71, and back up to 130 to finish strongly. Look, good to see him have a decent year coming back from a major injury, but he certainly wasn't at his best. Again, probably a break even for me, but I'll give Titch a tick. Mitch Sunken, a failed pick and on my never again list, I think. A small ceiling and a bit of a fake primo. This was a selection focused on value more than quality, and I paid for that. It seemed like if he got to 100, he'd barely get there. Scores of 101, 100, 90, 134 are just okay, but then a 4-week block of 80, 100, 95, 69, that really cost me. And to be honest, the only decent score he gave me, which was 134, most of those points came in the junk time of the last quarter, and he literally got 55 points in that quarter, so even that was lucky. So for me, another cross to add to the midfield list. And finally, Paddy Cripps, obviously a starting pick, as you can see there. It just wasn't his year. A popular pick, but certainly a failed pick. A combination of injury and poor form led to him delivering a season average of only 97.5. Well below par for a man of his quality. And from a Supercoach perspective, a year to forget. A massive, massive cross. I should give it a double cross, to be quite honest. But yeah, as I said, just wasn't his year. He may tempt some people next year due to his value. He may even tempt me, but at this stage, I'm looking to go nowhere near Cripps. On to the ruck roundabout. I'll start off with my R1, Brodie Grundy. He stayed there all year, and although he had some quiet patches and displayed more of his floor than his ceiling, he was still a great starting pick. But on to R2. Naismith, Segler, Pitney, Gawn, Laddams, Rob. So many swings, so many roundabouts. It was an absolute nightmare. Injury and suspension certainly played a major role in all of this, and I was forced into trading in and out, but way too much stuffing around, and that's what I get for not going with the set and forget ruck structure. I won't be making the same mistake again, and I just paid for this, you know. I'm just going to pay for quality at the start of next year. Not worry about a Naismith, a rookie in the ruck. Nah, bugger that. I'm just going with Grundy and Gawn and locking in a really, really safe combination. In regards to Rob, I owned him for the last 3 weeks. It was really nice, as I said, when I was discussing how he went in round 18 that he scored higher than Gawn. But yeah, I'll call him a success along with Brodie Grundy. But as an overall, my R2 was an absolute nightmare. So I will give that a cross overall. Onto the forward line, as you can see, my F1 to F3, they've stayed consistent throughout the whole year. That's always really handy because obviously less trades are required. Christian Petracca, a hugely successful starting pick. I'm actually in the process of making a detailed review video about him that's been in the works for a while now, so stay tuned for that soon. Look, we all knew he had the talent, but he'd never quite delivered. But a major change in role and improved tank, that allowed him to have a breakout year and become one of the premier players in the competition. He's tipped to place highly in the Brownlow, and for good reason. Look, he dominated games, delivered some massive scores such as a 160, 141, 160, 140, 142, and he was the highest averaging forward by a mile. So, will I select him next year as a pure midfielder? I don't think so. But hey, during the year, he's someone that I'll monitor really, really closely, and I wouldn't be surprised if he could finish in the top 8 for highest averaging midfielders in 2021. Dustin Brayshaw finished with the 5th and 6th highest average in our forward lines. Brayshaw, after a sluggish start, his time on ground and midfield minutes went through the roof when Fife went down. He went from a 4-round average of 78.5 to a 6-round average of 126.6. That's a 48-point rise. All he needed was to be given some more opportunity, and he took it with both hands. I started him at 382k, and in round 11 he peaked at over 574k. Unfortunately, had a slow last month, which also coincided with Monday's rise in form, but as a starting pick, a massive, massive tick for me. Really happy with this selection, and I'm glad that I kept the faith because I was looking to trade him out early, but given the fact that Fife did go down, I thought I will give him an opportunity just to prove me wrong. Hopefully we'll get some more time in the midfield, and that was a great decision in the end. Dusty, well, given the fact he averaged pretty similar numbers to Brayshaw, almost identical numbers to be quite honest, and I paid a lot more for him, I'm not going to call him a really solid pick, but look, he did average the 6th highest overall, I suppose, so you can't complain too much, so I'm not giving him a tick, I'm not giving him a cross, he's just Dusty, and I started with him, I suppose. I can't really say much more than that. Baz, now, for me, and again, this is different circumstances depending on when you actually bought Baz into the side, I suppose, but for me, I'm going to call Baz a failed pick, even though it was great to watch him, loved having him in my side, and gave me a decent average, a solid sort of an average. But the main reason why he's a failed pick for me is because I selected him over Lockie Whitfield, assuming that he would score or average pretty close to Whitfield. That was not the case, unfortunately, and that really, really hurt me because Whitfield, his ownership was above 50%, and not having him and deciding to go Smith over him, that just cost me too many points in the end. So, personal circumstances, love the player, was an okay pick, but personally for me, deciding to select him over Whitfield was a bad move and a failed pick for me. Blake Acres, bought him in a couple of weeks ago, so got a nice score, got an average score, so can't really evaluate that too much. No tick, no cross for Acres. And Jai Simpkin, this was one of my major trade-ins early on in the year. I brought him in round 4. He was averaging 125, looking absolutely magnificent. First 3 rounds, again, looking rosy. 119, 97, and a 127. But then, unfortunately, injured himself. Did something to his ankle, only came back with a 57. The week after, he actually got tagged by Kerno, 35. And then a 56 after that, went up to 103, thinking, okay, could be back. But then 74, 105, 100, 79, 48, 62, and then got his best score of the season with a 144 in round 18, which was nice. But look, for me, he gave me an average of only 86. So at the time of trading, an average of 125 gave me an average of 86. So I was raving about him after the first month and a half, probably the first couple of months, but unfortunately he has been a failed pick for me and someone that's been really disappointing to have in my side. So I'm putting the cross on Jai Simpkin. So in a nutshell, what worked well? Well, my 3 most expensive starting picks netted me my 3 highest season averages in Neil, McRae and Grundy. 2 out of my 3 real breakout players worked out really well in Track and Brayshaw. Unfortunately, though, didn't have a lot of mid-price success with players such as Robertson, Smith, Segler and Long. Injuries to blokes like Sicily, Duday, Shuey, Gorm went down for a while. Many of us coped with that sort of stuff, but that really hurt me as well during the season. And that ruck roundabout, yeah, just stuffed around way too much in my rucks. Alright, so my best trade of the year. It was a bit of a tough one, but it's hard to go past this one, Starcevic to Stewart. So I picked up Stewart in round 10. A little bit disappointing that first round, only gave me a 68, but after that did not go under the ton. So 100, 103, 117, 104, 123, 127, and 105. He really was Mr. Consistency for me in the defence during the last couple of months. So absolutely rapt to get him in. Initially, I was going to keep Starce right until the end, just as that bench option, because I thought he'll play most weeks. He's got that DPP status where it can flip him from mid to defence with someone like a Rivers. But in the end, someone had to go. That had to be Starce, and I'm rapt that I ended up getting Stewart in at just over 440k. Alright, so on to my worst trade of the year. It's not going to be a fun one talking about this, but in round 8, I bought in Max Gawn for 776k. He gave me a 157 on debut, was stoked. Then the 2 weeks after, he drops 2 out of his 3 lowest scores for the season, goes and injures himself, and then becomes a must trade. So I was looking at the options in front of me. There was just no one that stood out. So I decided to look for someone that I thought had the most value, the most upside. And that man was Peter the Peanut at 417,000. He was coming off 3 impressive scores, had a negative break even, that ruck forward status, a massive pod that not too many people were sniffing around. And I thought it would also allow me to bring in an extra primo on another line with the cash that I saved. But there was one thing I didn't realise, and that was that Laddams is an absolute goose, and I was breaking my NDH policy. So as the story goes, most of us know, Peanut Peter delivered me an 89 on debut, and then did himself an naughty, got himself suspended. And look, the most frustrating thing was that I skimped and saved every penny I could to bring in Gawn, and in the end, it was more trouble than what it was worth. So clearly my worst trade of the season was Gawn to Peter the Peanut. So what lessons have I learnt this year? Probably the number one thing for me is that I need to stick to the rules that I've put in place during the last sort of 5 to 10 years that I've been playing Supercoach. A lot of those rules went out the window this year. At the start, I thought, look, we'll have a little bit of fun with the season. I wasn't too sure if the season would even go ahead at some stage. So, I did sort of make a few interesting decisions that I normally wouldn't make in normal sort of seasons. So that's something that I'll really take out of this season. Stick to my rules. The second thing is that I need to identify and, more importantly, select the must-haves earlier on in the season. No more fake primos. I'm just going to focus on quality picks. With my starting side next year, I'm not going to mess around with any mid-prices. I'm going to lock in those must-haves. So your Seagulls, your Neils. As I said, I'm not going to have that ruck roundabout again. I'm just going to select a really solid R1 and R2 and hopefully get that loop in my forward line somewhere. I'm hoping someone like a Rowan Marshall, but set and forget in the rucks for me absolutely next year. And I suppose more than anything, I just really need to trust my gut. I waited a little bit long on particular players. I mentioned, Rory Laird waiting that extra week, missing out on his 180. That's just one example. There are other players that I was really keen on during the year. Should have got them in. If I did get them in, that would have gone a long way to getting a better overall ranking in the end. But unfortunately, hindsight is a wonderful thing on occasions, but I'm really, really looking forward to next year. I'm hoping that the season will just get back to normal amount of trades, 30 trades, the normal buy rounds that you can plan for, hopefully. All that sort of stuff, I think, will make it a lot easier for us. But they are certainly some of the lessons that I've learnt this year. All right, I know it's early, but I'm going to quickly talk about some of the blokes I'm looking to start in 2021. I'll make this quick because I've already talked about some of these blokes already in my review, and I will be making a separate video on this just to keep some content going during the preseason. So, in my defence, D1 to D3, we've got the Seagull, Lockie Whitfield, and Tom Stewart. Geez, it was such a rookie mistake, for someone that's been playing Supercoach for as long as I have, not getting Jake Lloyd in at any stage during the season. Absolutely killed me, pumped out premium numbers, midfield-like numbers, and so I'm going to just lock him in at D1 next year. Lockie Whitfield, he's got the asterisk there because I'm assuming he goes back to defence next year, but if he does, I'm definitely locking this bloke in. Should have got him in the forward line during the season. I didn't, and that cost me. So, again, like the Seagull, not making the same mistake again, going to lock him in. And Tommy Stewart, as I said before, Mr. Consistency. He's won a spot, I think, in my 2021 side. And the two blokes there in the maybe category are a couple of breakout defenders. Chera, I've really rated his year. Same as Lukosius. He's had a couple of quiet rounds lately, but he showed us what he can do with some really nice 120-plus scores during the season. So, look, I'm probably going to keep it safe and just go with probably 3 nice premiums. But depending on structure, I may look to get one of these blokes in. In the midfield, the two biggest locks for me are going to be Lachie Neale and Jack Macrae. If you look at the last couple of seasons, look at the numbers, they speak for themselves. Look, they'll lose some money at some stage during the season, but I'm not going to muck around and wait for these guys to go down. I'll just get them in from the start and know that I'll get a good average from these blokes all year, I think. Jack Steele and Clayton Oliver, close to locking these guys in. Contested beasts, clearance beasts, and Steele in particular, just love the way he tackles. Even if he gets tagged, he'll still tackle the house down. So, love those two guys. Look to get 1 or 2 of those blokes in. And then I also love these 3 picks as well that have got the question marks on them. Matty Rowell, this bloke could be anything, was in Brownlow form. We all had him in our sides at the start of the year. I was thinking 100% keeper, this bloke. But yeah, unfortunately he got injured, but he's someone we can definitely look to get in next year, I think. Taranto, he's had a really down season, obviously injured for a large majority of it, but when he came back, just didn't get back to that form that he showed last year when he really broke out. So he'll be some really nice value for us and someone that I'll consider next year. And Sam Walsh, if you look at his last 8 weeks, he's averaging about 120. This bloke really flowing under the radar. I think Cripps, and if Zach Williams makes his way to Carlton and plays through the midfield, I think those two blokes will get most of the attention. So Sam Walsh, I think, could be a really legitimate pick for next year. In the rucks, I'm not mucking around. Just get the two big boys in. No stuffing around whatsoever. Gawn, Grundy, Lock. And then the forward line, I'm assuming that Rowan Marshall gets some DPP status. That'd be brilliant. If he does, I'll just lock him in at F1, and that way he can swing with my R3 loophole. And if Gawn or Grundy go down for a week or two, I'm not going to stuff around with trading him, bringing blokes in that I'm not too keen on. I'll just get Marshall to cover for those couple of weeks if need be. Dunkley, again, I'm assuming gets forward status. I'm not quite 100% on this, but if he does, I'm absolutely going to lock him in. I started him in my midfield this year. Got injured, as we know, but I even traded him out before his injury, which is another terrible trade on my behalf. Sorry, won't get into that now, but definitely lock him in if he's available as a forward. And last bloke I've got there is Isaac Heaney. So I'm assuming he'll be sort of mid-400s. If that's the case, he presents some really, really nice value. He's been, geez, a frustrating pick, hasn't he? A real tease. Isaac Teasy, we should call this bloke. But look, if the value's there, yeah, I can certainly see myself starting with him. But that's a few blokes that I think we should be at least having a really, really close look at next year, and most likely the group of players that I'll be starting in 2021. Looking ahead to preseason content and some 2021 content, the stock market video, that'll be back bigger and better than ever next year. I've listened to feedback and I'll be keeping all of the original content with the price, break even, buy now signs, etc. But also adding in each player's 3-round average as well as their predicted scores. I know that lots of the blokes that have jumped on to my channel this year have been new to Supercoach, so they've also asked me if I can put out some sort of beginner type videos, so I'm also happy to do that if enough people need those. I'll cover the Marsh series, or whatever they call it, next year really closely and provide a team review on all 18 clubs. I'll make another breakout contender video series in the preseason, as well as a number of player reviews. We'll be creating my own Supercoach All-Australian side in the next week, which will be a bit of fun, so that should be out shortly. I'll also be reviewing the top 5 Supercoach scores of 2020 and dissecting each player's game. That should be a little bit of fun also. I've got a new Leapfrog series in the works as well. I'll continue to review the number 1 teams and obviously upload my own weekly review videos each week. So there'll still be a lot going on during the preseason and into next year. And if you're a Supercoach tragic like me, at least it'll give some stuff to talk about during the off-season. So that's pretty much it, guys. Season over. I'd like to give a massive thank you for all of your kind words and support during the year. I must admit I was a little bit nervous coming into this as I'm terrible with technology and it can be difficult at times putting yourself and putting your thoughts, ideas and opinions out there, but I'm extremely humbled to have reached 1,000 subscribers within a matter of months, and the best thing to come out of this season for me was meeting a great bunch of people that love the game as much as me. I finally got on Insta and Twitter, which really helped me to connect with a lot more people and a number of regulars on the channel. I could be here for hours and hours, to be honest, giving shout outs, but you know who you are. One thank you I do need to give is to Zach Cameron, who's offered to create a new logo for me next year, which is really generous of him. Studio Sixpence, so check out Zach on Facebook. A thank you to George, who joined me for the late season podcast, and it was great to chat with him during the year. Congrats on another ranking as well, George. That was absolutely phenomenal, mate. You killed it. And a massive thanks to Spills, who I spent hours and hours talking to during the season. Gotten the potties together, and we'll be doing the same next year with our new podcast, Supercoach Swordplay, so that should be fun. And finally, a big thank you to my beautiful wife for putting up with all of my nonsense during the season and assisting me on some very late nights and some very early mornings to get the stock market videos done with those short turnarounds. So thanks again, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy. Congratulations on a great season, and I'll see you all again soon. Cheers, guys. Bye.